to the Dungeon Plunger Podcast. My name is Jason Weeb, and this is the show in which I, a real-life janitor and dungeon master, teaches you how to plunge in and run a better Dungeons & Dragons game. Without further ado, let's plunge into this week's episode. Welcome, Dungeon Plunger Union members. I have my +1 plunger, a steaming hot cup of holy water blessed by St. Keurig, and I have a very special Union member with me today to help plunge the dungeon and flush evil down the drain. Our guest today is a former podcaster, or maybe a future podcaster again, we'll see, writer and artist. Welcome to the show, Ray Otis.
Hi. Yeah, I'm actually on the different alignment scale from you. I'm at work and I'm drinking water that's been cursed by the chaos gods of Nespresso. So,
Wow. I did not realize that Nespresso was the Chaos Gods.
right? Well, it's Saint Keurig, and so Nespresso is the opposite. He's the lord of caffeine beans or something. I don't know.
I mean, to me, the only thing is instant coffee. That to me is like chaotic evil. But
Oh, well, we could go down a rabbit hole on that. My dad drinks instant coffee, and I was out visiting him, and he's kind of a cheapskate too. And so we were getting ready to go somewhere, and he had made instant coffee for us. And he goes, "You want it to go?" And I said, "Sure." And he hands me a McDonald's cup, and I'm like, "Okay, so you like rinse this out and you're reusing it, you know?" And a McDonald's coffee cup. So we're out, and I finished drinking my coffee, and I chuck it in the nearest bin. And my dad looks at me like I had just, cut the tail off a puppy. He's like, "What did you do?" And I'm like, "Well, how many times do you reuse these cups?" But honestly, he kind of got me drinking. I actually think some of the better instants are not as bad as people make them out to be. And I kind of feel like it's like pizza. There's really good pizza, and then there's just pizza. And I feel like coffee, there's really good coffee, and then everything else. And kind of at that point, it's like drip, instant, whatever. It's kind of all the same.
you know, you're probably 100% right on that front. I haven't tried a lot of instant coffees, so that's probably because I'm not a coffee snob, you know.
Hmm.
So and like, look, I'll take instant coffee in a pinch, but it's not definitely not my preferred way of drinking the coffee.
There's something Midwest virtuous about it too. Like I come from the Midwest, and like
Mm.
there's this thing where you can kind of turn your nose up at things that are quote unquote high quality. So I kind of feel the same way about beer. There's like really good microbrewery craft beer, right?
Yep.
But I'm also perfectly happy drinking a Hams or something really cheap. Well, maybe not too cheap, but
Yeah,
I'm not above a Miller Lite.
I feel you, man. So the kind of what, well, actually, first of all, before we get too deep into this, I have a few listeners who probably don't know who you are. So just give us a little bit of a little overrun of who is the Otis.
Well, that's funny. So I probably got started being like known, if that's a thing, back in the Google Plus days. I did a zine called Plundergrounds, and then I did a podcast called Plundergrounds, and that's where most people will know me from. I still have some game designs out on itch.io, so you can just find it at, rayotis.itch.io. And but mostly in the last 4 or 5 years, I've just concentrated on gaming with my friends and trying to stay out of the putting obligations on myself to feel like I need to put things out there for review. Not, I don't know. It's a mental health thing and kind of a just trying to keep my life simple kind of thing. But yeah, so people can still find me around. I just restarted a website not too long ago, plundergrounds.quest, and so I have some links there. Probably need to go through it again, but most of my stuff you can get through there too.
Interesting. I'll have to get a link from you for that.
Hmm.
I know like one of the most influential documents that you created was the Gygax 25 challenge, which I thought
Yeah, Gygax
was, or
75. Yep.
sorry, Gygax 75. What
Yep.
am I thinking? Yeah, that was a pretty cool concept. I feel like that was really well received in the community.
It's probably the one that's gotten the most interest out there for sure. Uh, and it's honestly, I'll be honest about it. It's a little bit of a weird passive income. Like I have it out on itch.io for free, and people are willing to are welcome to take it for free. But people also kind of tip me sometimes, two, $3, $5 sometimes. And every once in a while I look and I have $80, $100 in there, and I can go out and buy a few beers or buy some more gaming materials. It's really cool. So I appreciate the response from the community, but basically it's just a taking an old article by Gary Gygax about world building and kind of breaking it down into a 5 week challenge and giving people some actionable steps. I'm big into like I'm big into like trying to carve overwhelming tasks down into to really what's the minimum viable product, right? Like what is it you need to actually get to the end of a thing, and then you can always iterate and improve on it later. But what's some steps that'll get you to where you want to go? And that's kind of what the 75 workbook is like.
I definitely appreciated that concept of, like you said, taking such a huge, because it is an overwhelming idea, right? Making a whole
It
campaign
can be.
setting.
Yeah, people make it out to be something like way bigger than it needs to be. One of the best articles out there on it is that three hex. I'm gonna forget who did that, but the three hex world building kind of thing,
It's
basically
Chicago
pointing out
Wiz.
that yeah, probably is Chicago Wiz. You're right, but it kind of points out that really like all you need, all you need to get started is basically a town, a patch of wilderness, and a dungeon, right? And if you
Yep,
got those three things, you've kind of hit the basics of what your characters are going to experience for the first dozen sessions or more.
100%. I agree. I think that kind of this has sort of been my mantra over this since I've started this podcast is sort of, the just do it kind of
Hmm.
thing, and that, you don't want to wrap yourself up in too much stuff.
Yeah.
Just
Oh, yeah, perfect's the
find,
enemy of done too, right? I mean,
yeah,
you could spend a lot of time building out a complete pantheon of gods, but if you can get players to the table and they only, they flake after 4 sessions, that was not what time well spent. Uh,
exactly. 100%. So what happened, you called into the show and you had mentioned that you had heard Jason Connerly from the Nerds RPG Variety Cast. Him and I had an episode that we did together. And I mentioned, a little bit talking about magic and Necromunda and that kind of stuff. And that kind of piqued your interest. And, you said, hey, why don't we talk about finding your joy in Magic the Gathering? And I was like, yes, I love Magic. That after role-playing
Me too.
games, Magic is like one of my favorite things to do. And it's probably just as or more expensive than role-playing.
Oh, can definitely be more expensive. Yeah.
So I was like, yes, Ray, let's do this. Let's talk about it. Um, so where at what time did you start playing Magic? When was the your entry point into the hobby?
Yeah, I honestly, it was right around 93, 94. So kind of in the beginning. The first cards I bought were from the unlimited white border stuff, right?
You didn't get any of the like alpha or the beta
I
or anything?
didn't. I
Okay.
didn't. I remember my shop, the guy that ran my local shop, he was talking about alpha boxes and having an alpha box. And gosh, I don't know, back then, right? Like I remember binders full of dual lands that were like $5 each that I
Mm-hmm.
could have bought. And like, oh, you know, but that's water under the bridge, right? But yeah, no, I just grabbed what was available. I remember Ice Age being on the shelf. I remember, what was there's Homelands, and then the one I really liked the one after that, and I can't remember the name. Fallen Empires. That was cool. That was a cool one.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's interesting because Homelands is considered to be probably one of the worst sets that
Yeah,
they ever
yeah.
made. And I think Fallen Empires was very close in that kind of,
They were both too small. The Dark was like that too, I think a little bit, which they were too small to have like a full. They didn't feel like a full thing, and there were a lot of weak cards in them. But Fallen Empires was where I think some of the best flavor ideas started. That's where kind of like it wasn't really where tribes started, but it feels like that they started developing like pocket worlds and really
definitely.
interesting setting ideas.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think one of the things that I really liked about Fallen Empires was, you know, you had so in red you had the dwarves and the goblins kind of fighting each other you know,
Hmm.
within the red. Blue, you had these like homerids and merfolk that were fighting each other.
Yep.
Uh Black, there was the Ebon Hand
The
and the
thralls.
thralls.
Hmm.
And white, there was I can't remember the name of the city, but it was
Mm.
basically like some kind of a city, and then there was like a religious fanatical order within the city.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I can't remember those either, but I do know what you're talking about. I can picture some of the cards.
And
Yeah.
green had elves and the Thalids.
And the Thalids. Yeah, I
Yeah,
was a big Thalid thrall guy. I like both those. I guess I like the evil stuff,
100%. That's exactly where I was at.
Homerids too, man. I had a high tide deck.
Yeah, so it's interesting because a lot of those, even though that set didn't do very well, there was a lot of lore that they've taken now and is found in like newer sets, which is,
Hmm.
I mean, a
It also
testament
was
to
it
how
was
cool it
very
was.
it was original and not vanilla fantasy, right?
Exactly. I
Like it had a
agree.
vibe. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do want to get deeper into this because I feel like there is a lot to talk about in terms of, what we can derive because this is a gaming podcast, ostensibly, I do kind of want to like come back and tie this back into gaming. But before we get there, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about like Magic itself. And so as people probably who listen to this podcast know, I play Commander, but you were mentioning that you play Cube and BattleBox.
Hmm.
And I've never played Cube before, and I'd never heard of BattleBox before. So, can you just describe to the audience a little bit what Cube is and how you would play it?
Yeah, sure. So there's a lot of what people call kitchen table magic formats, and those are the formats that are a little more casual, a little more fun oriented, less like about trying to win tournaments and win boxes and beat other players down. It's more about they're more social, right? And so Commander is one of those. That's a kitchen table format. But I have always liked, for me, the part I like. I don't like constructed very much in general, meaning where you go out and buy cards and then build from the cards that you bought and then bring them to battle because people are allowed to they get a little indulgent, right? They just try to build the like most broken thing they can build, and that's enabled by having an endless card selection and stuff. Well, I've always liked draft because I like that you just get what you get out of packs and you have to make something out of it. And the ultimate for me, the drafts can be expensive because you're always going and paying to get into a draft. And then honestly, you have a lot of cards left over that you don't, they even have a name for it, the draft chaff, right? Where people throw their commons to the side because they've already got 5 copies of all of them. And a great place, by the way, to pick up spare magic cards. Just
Hmm.
float in after a draft and sweep up everything nobody wants. But so I started getting into this idea of cubes, and especially when my son was very little, I was teaching him how to play, and so I built a little beginner's cube. A cube is it's really just a set of, it's a custom draft set. So you build a box of cards, right? And it doesn't have to be anything special. There is kind of a notion that they're the best of Magic, but it doesn't have to be that. But you usually only have one of each card, meaning like in a constructed deck, it might be built around a certain idea, and you might have 4 copies of a particular card. But in Cube, you only have one copy of each card, like you do in Commander, right? And then you draft out of that box and you play against each other. Now, my favorite draft is the 2-man Winston draft, which is kind of a neat little. And we can talk about that if you want how that works. But
Sure.
basically, it's a so you basically take a stack of 90 cards and you set them face down to one side, and then you put 3 cards face down in a row in front of you, and the first person looks at the first card, decides if they want it or not. If they do, they take it, and then you put another card off the top of the deck to fill that hole. If they don't, they put that card back and then put a card off the deck on top of it. So now that stack of the 3 stacks has 2 cards, and they go to the next one. And they do that till they get to the third card. And if they don't want the third card, then they just take one off the top of the deck, right? But at some point, you draw a card, either the first, second, or third, or off the top of the deck. And as soon as you draw that card, your turn is over and it goes to the other person. Well, now the other person's looking through those same 3, and they might have, two cards in the first stack. So they get to look at both the cards and decide if they want them both. And if they do, they can take them. And, so what happens is weak cards start to add up. Like if it's a weak card, it starts to accumulate more and more cards on top of it. So now sometimes like eight fairly weakish cards are better than like one good card. And so at the end of it, you end up with 45 cards, and then you build a deck and you battle. And it's the cool thing about cubes in general and drafting is that, well, just cubes in general, is that one, you can kind of learn the cube over time. You know what cards are in it. You can also keep it fresh by bringing new cards in and getting rid of old cards that don't work so well. I find you cut both sides. You cut both weak cards and cards that are too strong. You don't want a card that, like, if you draft that card, it's kind of an auto win. So if that starts to happen, you just chuck that card out and say, no, that's no good. It breaks the format. But you get to kind of learn the cube, the ins and outs, the types of draft archetypes you can go with, like what kind of tribes or what kind of feel of deck you want to build. And then you build it and you play, and then it all goes back in the box and you start again next time. So that's kind of cube. A battle box is a little different because cube you draft and then you add your own lands to it. A battle box is a stack of cards and you both play from the same stack instead of having your own library, your own deck of cards in your library and everything. You have one deck that is your both of your libraries, and you draw cards off the top of that deck. And the battle box rules are that the way I play it, you draw 5 cards and there's no mulligans, and you have a set of lands off to the side. You have 10 lands off to the side. They're usually dual lands, right? Kind of one of each of the dual sets. Not the expensive ones, but the
Yeah.
you know the
Yeah.
cheap ones, right? That come in tapped or whatever. And then every turn you can play a land out of that zone, like you would out of your hand. Same rules, right? One land per turn. And that kind of gets you past all the mana screw that can happen in Magic that makes the game a little odd sometimes. And again, it's just a very casual format. It travels really well. I had brought cubes with me on vacation and played them with my son and other people, and that's kind of the gist of it.
Interesting. So a
Hmm.
couple of questions. For cube, is there a certain number of cards that you have in your cube, or is it like as many as you want?
Yeah. So it is kind of as many as you want. There is a minimum kind of, and if you're planning to draft with, like, 6+ people, you want like at least 360 cards in your cube. Most cubes are probably more around 480 to like 720 in that neighborhood,
Okay.
right? Because you want to kind of not draft the whole box every time, because then it's kind
Right.
of a known quantity. And but I keep several two-man cubes because I actually still just like playing, one-on-one most of the time with Magic. And the two-man cubes, they can be smaller, like 180 cards or something like that, where you draft half of it each time. Yeah.
Interesting. And
Hmm.
when you say you get 45 cards, you use those to build your deck and then you build a 60 card deck including lands, or
Oh,
is
no,
it
you're building a 40 card deck like you would for draft. So
okay.
so
So
it's
you would
the
add basics in after.
Yep, that's
Okay.
right. Yeah. What's the
Gotcha.
typical, like, 16, 17 lands? 17 lands usually
Right.
plus. So basically out of that 45, you're taking can I do math here? 23 of them, right, as your
Right.
playables. So about half the cards you draft are the ones you actually play with. So that gives you some room to, like, make some mistakes, right? Draft
Gotcha.
things. Especially early on, you don't really know what color you're going to be into, and when because you're seeing cards and not taking them, you can kind of get a sense of what your opponent is taking.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, so
And
it
sometimes
really
you can kind of
does.
tease them into a color by leaving a good card there for them and hoping
Mm,
they take it, and then thinking, okay, now they're in, I know what color they're in, and I can choose the other colors, right? Or
that's an interesting strategy.
yeah, there's a lot to it. Honestly, I feel like it's a very strategy heavy format. Yeah. There's
Yeah, that
there's another way that people sometimes play where they lay out a grid of like 3 by 3 cards, and then the first player chooses a column or a row, so you get 3 cards, and then the next player chooses a column or row, and then you sweep everything else to the side, and you do it again. I think I can't remember exactly how that works, but there's a format like that too. There's lots of different ways to draft, is all I'm saying.
okay. Because my understanding with Cube had always been that you had to like take the cards and then put them into packs, basically. And then you would pull
Right.
those packs out and then you would draft that pack. And I was
Yeah.
just like, oh, the amount of effort that must go into having to collect all those things after, make sure that you had like the right number of commons and uncommons and a rare
Right.
and whatever. And I was like, I don't even want to do that.
All right. So
But
so
what?
let's talk about that for a second. Cubes don't have to be like you would think out of 360 cards. Usually they're sectioned and you say, well, I'm going to have people try to balance the colors and have so many of each color of each of the five colors. And then usually there's a section for like artifacts or gold cards or lands. Sometimes those are one section, sometimes they're multiple sections. There is a lot that can go into cube design, and yes, it can become like an obsessive, like intellectual exercise, but it doesn't have to be, right? and some people make draft packs and they go in and like here's how I do it. Like I do have a pretty well balanced. I pretty much just have the section one section for each color and then one section for artifacts, lands, and gold cards all together. And then when we are done playing, when we've drafted through the whole box, we do a quick sort into those five piles, and then we basically lay them out in a grid, like a whole bunch of blues, and then or a whole bunch of whites, and on top of that a bunch of blues and a bunch of so basically you and then we start stacking those, and then you cut them a few times because you don't want a perfect distribution, and then
Right.
throw it back in the box, and the whole thing only takes maybe 5-10 minutes to do, and then
Okay.
you're ready to go again. It's really not too bad.
Interesting. Nice. And then that's 20 life you play with?
Yeah, 20 life.
Okay. And the same thing for Battle Box, it's 20 life?
Hmm.
Interesting. And when you, for the Battle Box, do you have basics that you add to that? Or is it the
No.
basics are in that deck and that's just
There's
the,
no there's no lands in the shared deck unless you want like lands that do stuff, right?
okay.
But you don't need any basic lands at all. You just have the 10 both players have a set of 10 lands, and they're the dual lands, and they begin in the command zone, right?
Okay.
So you have 10 dual lands and I have 10 dual lands, and that should be enough for me to cast about anything, right? Even a triple green thing. But I mean, you can't put in a card that's like 8 green. That's not going to work.
Okay. But let's
So
say
yeah, but yeah.
I use something like a cultivate where I can search my deck to get two basics, put one
Ah,
in,
yes,
onto the
yeah, yeah,
battlefield and one in my hand.
right.
I would take from that command zone pile, is what you're saying, of lands?
So okay, so the let's kind of visualize it for a second. You have in your command zone, you have those 10 lands, and then in between you have a giant stack of your battle box cards. That's your library,
Right.
both of your libraries, and then you each have a separate discard pile, your graveyard, right?
Okay.
And then your hand. So those are all the different zones. Typically, tutors are you go light or no tutors typically,
Okay.
because tutors really kind of mess things up. And if they do, I like ones that kind of mess with like the top of the deck,
Mm,
or go into your graveyard, because that creates a good strategy. So this is where it kind of differs from like normal Magic, I guess,
right.
is in that kind of stuff, because there are some types of cards that just don't work great in the battle box format, and tutors
Gotcha.
are one of them. You don't want too much deck manipulation, because because it's a shared library, and because it's huge, and because it just takes too much time.
Yeah, I can imagine those shuffle your deck cards must be a real pain in the butt.
Yes, you don't want, that's exactly what you don't want, is something where you go through the whole deck and find one thing and then shuffle it. No, no, no. I like things that like bounce a creature. Like here's a good example. Like if you have a card that takes somebody else's creature and puts it on top of the deck, one from the top, that means you're probably going to draw it, right? So not only
Right.
are you removing their creature, but you're trying to manipulate it so when it comes time your turn to draw, you get to draw that creature. So it's little tricks like that that make it kind of different and fun.
Yeah, that it's pretty fascinating. Like, honestly, I have to say one of the things that I love about Magic and this format that you're talking about, the cube and the battle box, like these things exemplify how diverse this game is and how
Hmm.
well, I guess, designed it was. Because one of the things that
Yeah.
I've always really appreciated about Magic is, you buy a booster pack and you're like, it's easy to say, oh yeah, I get a pack full of cards. But when they build these sets and the way they make the packs, they're designing cards for draft. They're designing cards for constructed in terms of like whether you get your six packs and make a deck,
Right.
whether you're going to build your standard deck or you're going to build a modern deck or well maybe not so much
Hmm.
modern but like Commander definitely has become like the dominant sort of I think design space now that they've really been working in for better or worse.
Yeah.
So to just and then like you said, like so you got Cube and Battle Box, and I think there's another format. I think it's called Horde, where it's just a whole whack of zombies. I don't really
Oh
remember
yeah,
how it
no, I've
works.
played those where everybody plays against the central stack, like
Yeah,
you're being attacked by the. Yeah, I've played those. Yeah.
or Arch Enemy or Two-Headed
Oh yeah.
Giant.
Oh, and
I
I
mean,
had love two-headed giant, and I used to have what's the plane hopping or the
oh
shoot. I love that one actually.
yes, I want
I
to
used to
say
keep it.
Plane Chase. Is that it?
I think that's what it was, plane chase. But I actually used to have my own set of cards that were basically like world enchantments, and so you'd play basically do that. Like the idea of that one is you've got they had big cards that were different planes, and they would kind of exert an influence over the battlefield, and they might say something like, "Oh, whenever a creature died, it goes back dies, it goes back to your hand," and it affects both players, so it creates like changes the physics of the world, right? And then as you play in the game, you can roll a die and try to change that plane if you want to something different to change the effect. Like you might change then into like oh, what's the red wrath card that doubles all damage, right? Like
Yeah,
that kind of stuff.
yeah,
So I used to keep a deck of those. You don't have to buy the official plane chase. You can just find world enchantments and magic that are cool and keep your own little chaos deck, right? I think they call it chaos magic. No, that's something else. But you're right. The point is, there's a ton of different formats to investigate. Yeah. And they don't all involve you spending ridiculous amounts of money. In fact, one of my favorite cubes is a commons cube, and you can find it online. This one started with a guy named Adam Staborski way back when, and he created this hyper efficient to buy cube, right, made of all commons, and it became managed by a community, and I think it's just called thepaupercube.com. I think that's
oh,
the.
interesting.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean that's another format too, right? Pauper
Hmm.
is another one,
Yeah,
which
but the
not
other thing,
isn't
sorry, the other thing.
necessarily cheaper because some of those Pauper cards are pretty
Oh yeah,
expensive.
no, some of them are, but the paupercube.com, that cube, they specifically avoid the ones that have gotten too high in price.
Okay.
So that's an eliminator for them. One other thing I wanted to say about cubes there's so many things to say. Sorry, I get kind of
Nah,
excited and
go.
go forever.
I love it, man.
But one of the things you can do with a cube that's really fun is if there's a specific set or world that you really like. Let's say you like, Outlaws of Thunder Junction, or you like, oh, I can't think of the name right now, but it's one I like. Where the Phyrexians take over the metal planet. What's the name of?
Mm,
Oh, God,
I know what you're talking about. There was
I can't.
Dark Steel.
Dark
Oh,
Steel is a thing in that world. I can't think of the name. Oh, it's Mirrodin. Mirrodin.
Mirrodin, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
it.
And New Phyrex now New
Yeah.
Phyrexia. Right. But the card set that came out in the, oh gosh, the late 2000s, that was the kind of Phyrexians taking over Mirrodin. I really liked that set, and because of that, I built a cube at one point that was just that world. So you only have only cards from that world, right? And it can come from different sets that they've released in that world. Maybe you like Innistrad, you like all the vampires and the werewolves and all that, but that allows you to play in the flavor, to select what cards are in the pool overall, right?
Yeah.
So it becomes like D&D world design that way.
Yeah, definitely. I agree.
Hmm.
I feel that is one of the things also that's so amazing about Magic is the world building. And I don't really understand. So like basically we've got Wizards was the people who Wizards of the Coast made Magic. Eventually they
Hmm.
bought D&D and kind of revived it during the third edition era for better or worse, whatever people think.
Hmm.
And there was always this talk that at some point it was like, oh, well, now they can combine the two, right?
Yeah.
And we never saw it for like a really,
Yeah.
really long time. And I remember the only Gen Con that I ever been to, I ended up meeting Sue Cook, Monty Cook's wife, while I
Oh,
was
okay.
doing a
Hmm.
play test for third edition before it had come out. And I had mentioned that, and apparently Monty, and I could be mistaken, but my from what I understand, Monty Cook had worked with the team and they were working on a Magic the Gathering D&D game, and then it just never ended up coming out. And they were basically like, we're not going to cross the streams. So like that
Right.
would destroy everything. Everything would implode, right?
I think they're so wrong on that, but whatever. Yeah, they
So
have done something. Yeah, you're going to mention it, I think, what they've
yeah,
done
so
since.
now they've come out with these D&D books. So we have the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravnica, and they did
Hmm.
Theros, and they did some other ones. Um, but I kind of feel like they fell flat. I don't know. Did you
Hmm.
had what's your experience with the D&D books?
I agree. I agree. I mean, I want to like them and I appreciate what they're doing, right? But the thing is, so I think we can kind of combine this with the topic of how magic has changed over the years. Because so in the early days of Magic the Gathering, you had core fundamental concepts that were introduced by Richard Garfield, the designer, like the colored pie, right? So
Yep.
you have these five, they're on the back of the card, the five colors of magic, and each color has its kind of indicative species like merfolk or goblins or elves or whatever. And they have their kind of indicative styles of magic. So like, black revives things from the dead, and green is life energy, and red is destruction, and white is order. And they have they have like philosophies, and they have tribes, and they have all these things that are super cool. And in the early days, when you were playing Magic, you were a wizard battling another wizard, right? And
Hmm.
you would summon creatures and to fight on your side, and you would cast spells to influence the battlefield and all that kind of stuff. And then as time went on, first the first sort of default world was called Dominaria, right? And then they started adding new worlds like the Fallen Empires, I think, still in Dominaria, but
Yep.
they started adding other worlds, right? I was trying to think, what's the first world they added? Can't. Was it Ravnica? No, surely it was before Ravnica.
That's a
Um,
good question,
I don't know,
actually.
the Weatherlight, they were traveling right through. So the guys just started getting into this idea of like a multiverse. But so you started getting this idea of the multiverse, and that's cool. And the sets started coming out, and some of the sets were like devoted to specific worlds, and that allowed them to explore different like fantasy spaces. And then like, some that were a little more sci-fi, or some that were a little bit more like Western or whatever. And
Hmm.
then they introduced at some point, to get back to the kind of some of the people like Peter Atkinson, was a both involved heavily, obviously, in Magic and in Wizards of the Coast with D&D with Wizards of the Coast, and he would have been like the great, I think, sort of like crossover person to have done this. But post the sale, when Peter Atkins, I think it was after Atkinson sold Wizards of the Coast, it started becoming a little more corporate for good or ill.
Hmm.
And you had one of the things they did was introduce planeswalkers, and planeswalkers are now these like heroes that travel between the planes. And one of the things that I kind of bemoan was that you move from being the wizard, uh, summoning your armies to battle against another wizard, and you now become kind of like the manager of a baseball team. You
Hmm.
got your favorite players, and you got your favorite like, and somehow, I mean, that's cool, but it's not as cool to me. And the worlds, they started revisiting their best worlds. So like Ravnica was one of their most popular sets ever. So now they've been back to Ravnica, I don't know what, like five or six times, I feel like.
Yeah, that sounds
um,
right.
and they started settling in on some of these worlds like Ravnica and Theros and Mirrodin or New Phyrexia, and so those worlds become like their staple worlds. Tarkir, what's the one that's kind of has energy and is based on kind of
Um,
Indian
they
mythologies and.
just changed the name of what the plane is now.
Mm.
Um,
At any rate, they
oh,
have these worlds, and they've started
yeah.
tying them together, sort of like D&D. I think this has spilled over a little bit into D&D. Is they're starting to think about the multiverse and how they tie the multiverse together. And that, from a corporate standpoint, that's good, but from a flavor standpoint, it means like everything is falling into this melting pot of like unremarkable fantasy for me. Like it's sort of everything fantasy.
Mm,
And I don't love that. Actually, one of the most flavorful sets ever past Fallen Empires was Kamigawa. The first Kamigawa set blew my mind. Loved that
really?
set.
You know
Loved that
what's so
set.
interesting is at the time people were like this is they called it
Yeah, yeah,
crapagama
yeah,
because
yeah,
the
yeah,
cards sucked, and now it has some of the most powerful cards that people seek. I mean, that was kind of why they went back to it, right?
yeah. Yeah, which is a shame because I like sets that in some ways were like fun to play in and of themselves, but were hard to cherry pick for other formats.
Mm,
Because then the cards would stay like relatively cheap to buy and all that. because for me it was about exploring the world, and I liked and the you didn't want slow play either. I mean, you also like if you're going to play the game, you want it to be kind of you don't want it to take forever to play a game, right? Like
Yeah,
yeah, some of the sets can be like juggernauts, right? Like we just have like it takes a long time to develop a battlefield and then it's mind numbing until it all breaks free. And others are super fast. But anyway, it's I don't know. We were talking about what were we talking about? Oh, so so to come back to the topic that we started on, which was how to turn magic into like how they could have collided in a good way, magic and D&D. I think they missed the boat on not creating an alternate world for D&D that was based on the five colors of magic, right?
mm,
Because me, that's fundamentally the thing. That's where it all starts. Is the color pie.
hmm.
That's what makes it go. I think. What makes it really interesting to me, you know?
I agree. So I feel like the direction that they took Magic and D&D was they were like, okay, you're not going to be the planeswalker. You're going to be a regular dude that's living in that world,
Yeah,
which is kind of lame
yeah, kind of. That's right.
because we could
Yeah.
already do that. Like,
Also, there's no such thing anymore as like you're not going to be a blue wizard or a white wizard. You're going to be like you know, it's even the decks are like this now too. People want multicolored decks, they want
mm,
multicolored sets. They want to cast. Remember Star Magic back in the day? Star Magic was you sat around a table, you needed five people, and you sat around the table in the order of the colors on the back of the card, and one person was basically the red wizard, one's the green, you brought that colored deck and you played as like the white wizard versus the black wizard and the red wizard and the green wizard versus the blue and the black wizard. And your enemies were across the table and your allies were to either side. And it just had a lot of, I don't know, and
that's
maybe I'm being
interesting.
nostalgic about it, but I just thought that the kind of design concepts were really cooler back then before they all became like anybody could be everything.
That's interesting because I remember playing Emperor.
Oh yeah, Emperor. Yeah.
I've never played Star Magic though. That's pretty
hmm
cool. So,
Emperor was about the same time. That one you played 3-on-3, right? Where
yeah,
like, yeah, yeah, you had
yeah,
like it was sort of like two big battles. It was like a big battlefield with two armies meeting, and they each had wings, right? So you tried
yeah,
to collapse the other guy's wing and get to the middle. Yeah.
yeah. It was pretty. I, again, I just, again, when it comes to the world building, when you think about, so this is, I feel like the Magic the Gathering worlds are some of the coolest worlds out there to be able to
Mm-hmm.
like role play in and do stuff. And yet, using the fifth edition rules, like, and I'm not knocking fifth edition or anything. I just felt like if we wanted to play real Magic, like play in the setting of Magic the Gathering, we needed mechanics or some sort of rules framework that was going to really reflect exactly what you're talking about. So
Yeah.
to be that, like, I use this kind of magic and I'm able to call on these types of abilities to
Mm-hmm.
like allow me to, and maybe that was
On
the
the idea
pro
of mana, right? So
yeah,
maybe they should have had an energy source for magic that is expendable. They should have had, and even I like in the early days of Magic, if you left mana in your pool unspent at the end of a turn, it caused you damage. So I kind of like the idea of like overextending or having unused power sort of like become toxic and kind of building up. I mean, that would have been kind of cool. There's just, I mean, there were lots of cool things. It's just, but it's just a difference. Like, so in the early days, and I guess it's more interesting in some ways in play now, but like in the early days, there were a lot of what they call vanilla creatures with just had an attack and a defense. You had a bear, and it was
yep,
power two and defense two, and that was it. And now it feels like every creature, common, everything, they all are a bag of tricks. So like they all, most of them have like enter the battlefield abilities or tap it to do this kind of thing. And so it becomes much, much more mechanical, which makes the play really interesting sometimes, but it also kind of weakens the flavor, right? Like Mark Rosewater, is that right?
yep,
Sounded funny to me when I said that. He's a good thinker, and I like to listen to him a lot. I haven't recently, but I used to listen to his podcast, and he would talk about top-down design. And so
yeah,
the best cards are ones that like where those extra tacked on abilities kind of make sense, like like maybe there's a character on a card that's like a warden or a policeman, that's a guard, right? And when they come into battlefield, it taps down an opponent's creature, like they've caged it,
Yeah,
and then if it dies, the other creature gets untapped. It's free again.
right.
Okay, that's flavorful. But if it's just like play a card, and when you play this bear, I think Owl Bear has this one. You play the Owl Bear, and you draw a card. Okay, why does an Owl Bear draw a card? That's not flavorful.
Yeah. That's
You
a
know,
good
like
that's a good
it's a
point
good
actually.
card.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I feel like that kind of is where we get that issue of, the design space in the sense of like we need cards to fill in certain mechanical concepts
yeah.
for the game. And it just was like, okay, well, look, man, we got an owlbear. Nobody knows what an owlbear does, so I guess drawing a card is cool. Uh, but I also feel like this is where like Commander was like a detriment to the color pie because people wanted to be able to build decks, but it was like, well, red doesn't have any way um to
Oh
get
yeah, the
mana.
weaknesses, right? The
Yeah.
weaknesses.
So
Oh,
part of
and
what made
this,
them
yeah,
interesting,
yeah. Go
right,
ahead. Sorry.
was yeah, I'm sorry. But part of it was they had, like you said, they have weaknesses. So there was like, well, red has the ability to do direct damage and fire and all this kind of stuff, but it's not good at doing this. That's the trade-off. This is what you're
Hmm.
getting. And you had to figure out creative ways to get around that. And now it feels like every color is able to compete on
Yeah,
some level.
right. Now let's compare that to D&D. Isn't it true now that kind of every class can do everything? And like especially with, and I'm not trying to, I mean, I don't want to pick on it too much, but like
Hmm.
I feel like when fifth edition, and I like fifth edition a lot,
Hmm.
but when it came out, I noticed that like almost every class has kind of a path it can take that makes it into a hedge wizard, right? So like you
Mm.
have a thief class that can cast a bunch of spells, and you're like, wait, so now, there's less I don't know, niche protection is maybe not the right word, but there's kind of a less flavor because everybody can do everything, kind of, and
Mm.
that's the magic cards were like that too. Like what was green couldn't remove enchantments very well, and black was power, but at the expense of like you could hurt yourself, right? That
Hmm.
was its weakness, and there were
Hmm.
each one had, and the weaknesses made them super flavorful. But what they couldn't do was as important as what they could do.
Right.
Mhm.
Right. I think maybe I so first of all, I'm kind of curious as to why that's the case. Like what I understand on some level there was that problem where people like, oh, well, we don't have a cleric in our group, so now we
Mm.
can't play tonight.
Right. Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
how are we supposed to do anything if we're not going to get the healing that we need?
Right.
Or how are we going to open the doors and the traps because the guy playing the thief can't make it this week, or, you know, whatever the reason might be. And so they needed to make ways to get around that so that,
No, you nailed it. That's right. I think it's Magic does Magic and D&D both. In looking at their play community, one of the things they try to do is avoid feel bads, right? Feel bad
hmm,
moments. And some people talk about old D&D. They have the save or suck moment, right? Like you get poisoned and you got one roll, and if you don't make that roll, you could just die. And there are, or any game where you like can get eliminated early or lose a turn or something like that. Like early blue magic could be really obnoxious because it had
mm,
so much control built into it that it basically the other person never got to play. And that, I mean, that's terrible, right? That's bad. That's a feel bad. And I think in trying to remove the feel bads, they erred on the side of giving people the ability to kind of halfway do the things like, a ranger can heal some or something. It's like they try to give them uh, you have like your main class, and you get to sample bits of other classes just so you're more well-rounded, I guess. Yeah,
so
at the expense of flavor. Yeah.
talking about worlds and stuff. Magic has kind of gone through this thing now where now we have these universes beyond,
Mm-hmm.
which kind of started with the secret layers, and we had Walking Dead, and
Oh, yeah.
eventually we
Yep.
had Warhammer 40K, the Middle Earth. I mean,
Yeah.
now we got the latest one, Final Fantasy. There's supposed to be an Avatar, Last Airbender. SpongeBob SquarePants, Spider-Man. Like it's really getting kind of ridiculous at this point.
Yeah,
What's your take on all of that? Where do you,
hate
what,
it.
yeah.
For me, it's like the cash grab planes. It's like
Mm,
I mean, and look, I'm a Lord of the Rings fan. I'm a fan of some of these other intellectual properties that they've dipped into, but I'm not interested in. I know. I mean, this is just me. I can be a curmudgeon if I want to be. Right. This is my
hmm.
choice. I don't like the. It doesn't make sense to me. Like it's not core magic in terms of like it doesn't the flavor doesn't belong. Right. But also, it's weird. It feels weird that it's like mixing prop. I don't know. So many things I want to say, but I don't like the collectible cards either very much. The ones that are
Mm,
like all the different alternate arts and all that kind of stuff. They've done a pretty good job of kind of separating it, so you can now just buy booster packs that don't have any of the collector stuff, and that's fine with me. But yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's yeah. Again, I feel like it's just an opportunistic thing, and that's great for the people that want it. For me, I'm not interested. I'm out on all those sets.
yeah, I tend to agree. I feel as if the corporate money side has like overcome the what's made the game,
Yeah, yeah.
and now we're gonna have more non-Magic Universe cards coming out than we
Mhm.
are like, or sorry, yeah, then we're gonna have actual, Magic Universe cards.
Yeah, and sometimes they waste a good design on a card that like man, I wish wish that design of that card were in a core set, in flavor as opposed to being like the Gollum card or whatever.
Mm,
Let me tell you
100%.
yeah, let me tell you a story about a peanut butter omelet. This is I'll try to keep this short, but my wife laughs at me all the time about this. She likes to make fun of me for this. I was in New Orleans and I had an omelet that had chili in the middle of it, and I thought it was amazing.
Hmm.
And so later on, I've always liked if you sit around a campfire. Believe me, this relates. I'm just going to take a minute to get there. When you sit around a campfire, I always liked when you get one of those pie irons and you can make like a hot peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and the peanut butter gets all runny and it's kind of sealed in, and you burn your tongue, but it's just like so freaking good. So one day I thought I could make omelets. I thought, well, let's try it. Peanut butter omelet. It sounds disgusting, but who knows? So I made it. It took a couple bites, and it was disgusting. And I was like, this is gross. What was I thinking? And I chucked it in the trash because peanut butter has that kind of musty, like, umami kind of neat flavor. And then eggs have a little bit of that kind of sulfury thing, and they just don't
Hmm.
get along, right? So a couple years go by, and it strikes me again. I'm like, well, maybe I just wasn't in the mood, so I do it again,
Mm.
right? And I try it again, and it's disgusting, and I throw it away. And then I'm in Montreal talking to my friend, a gamer friend up there, and I tell him this joke, that's kind of making fun of myself, and he's like, hmm. So he goes off and he makes like this kind of Thai peanut butter sauce and tries it that way, and it was better, but it was still pretty gross. And then, I mean, so the point is, I tried this thing like 3 or 4 times, right,
Hmm.
until I finally just decided peanut butter and eggs don't go together, right? They just don't. And even though by themselves, I freaking love eggs and I freaking love peanut butter, right?
Hmm.
So when sometimes though, what makes a thing flavorful and exciting and cool and unique and like its own thing, by mixing it with something else, it just doesn't like it just destroys them both, right? A peanut butter omelet is not a good peanut butter flavor and it's not a good egg flavor. And I
Mm.
feel like some of these things, like, Magic SpongeBob, I didn't know they were doing that one. Like, that is wrong. I mean, just like, whatever. You're just making cards. Like, you might as well just turn it into a sticker book or something. Like, what's maybe it's fun. Maybe I'm just a jerk, but I just don't like it.
I mean, I don't think you're wrong. So, talking about world building and inspiration, what do you think that we can take as gamers and game masters from Magic and apply it to our games?
Right. Well, we mentioned like one of the coolest D&D thing would have been for them to do the 5 colors and also the flavor of magic because like counter spells and instants and things like that would have been cool to see in D&D. And there's a little bit of that in D&D, but I think one of the what do we take from that? I think if you're world designing, I do think you look at some of the individual. Don't take magic as a whole, but look at one set, right? Like one plane, and kind of look at what makes that plane unique. I used to in Plundergrounds, the zine. I had an exercise that I gave people one time, which was you take one letter of the alphabet and you can try to create a setting with monsters only from that letter of the alphabet, right? And you'd be surprised how cool of a setting it gets. And it's about creative constraints. It's about taking things away as much as it is. It's like giving you tools. It's, and so then like another example that's kind of fun is if you take a flavorful set, like what's the Pirates and Dinosaurs set?
Ixalan.
Yeah, Ixalan. By the way, I want to take credit for that set because Mark Rosewater one time back, I was on Twitter back in the day, and Mark Rosewater said, "What do we need more of in Magic?" And I said, "Pirates and Dinosaurs." And I feel like that was like 2 years before Ixalan came out, and I'm like, dude, that was me. I did it. That was me.
That sounds like he had that day. He had to go into a design meeting.
Yeah,
he was sending out his homework to everybody.
Yeah,
and you were the one that nailed it.
I feel like I captured something there, or just like other people. I don't know what it was, but anyway. So that set is a good example, or any set that's super flavorful. They did kind of a Mouse Ritter type set recently, right? That was all like,
yes,
Martin of Red Wall or whatever.
Yep.
So you could just take a pack from one of those, and you open up a pack, and you just kind of lay out the cards, and then try to build a scenario from those cards.
Interesting.
So I've done it before, and it's actually quite. Like, it's not only fun to do, but it actually makes a pretty good basis for a scenario. Like, you'll have a couple creatures. Some of them look like they're, like more NPC type creatures, like named, or some just look like monsters, like something you might encounter. You get a couple spells, and you think, okay, what's interesting about this spell? What's it doing? But if it's a scroll that explodes in fire, okay, there's a cool magic item, right? Or is it like a force cage? Okay, right? Like you can start playing around with these different things that are in the pack and just try to create a little. I don't want to say story, but try to create a little environment where these things are sunk in the environment that players can encounter them. And that's a great like little creative tool. Yeah.
So have you used something like that in adventures, like in a campaign that you've had?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, honestly though, I'm gonna say that I know I did it because it was, I don't know, it's probably 4 or 5 years ago, and I got into this idea. I pulled one together, and then I ran one shots of one of my games, Sorcerers and Sellswords. I was running. It was based on lasers and feelings, and I was running one shots, and I used a couple of those for that. I can't remember though how they, what the exact particulars were.
Okay.
But yeah.
Interesting. I'm just trying to think about in terms of the
heck of nothing else. I think Ben Milton did this. He did a thing on his channel where he got a 1.5-inch circle punch, and he went through a bunch of old magic cards that were draft chaff or whatever, and he would punch out pictures and then put them on wooden discs because they use them as counters.
That's pretty cool.
I did a little thing like that where I took them and I had a hex counter punch, and I put them on wooden things to build little worlds. So like you took some of the lands and made and then you could kind of randomize your map. But those magic pictures, again, like some of those cards are, when you get the ones that aren't worth anything, you can buy them by the bag, right? And just cut out the pictures and make little stories for yourself,
There's a hex cutter.
Yes, there is. Yeah.
What the dude? This is a game changer right now. I got to figure out what this is and put it in the show notes.
I'll have to look on my Amazon list because I know it's in there because that's where I bought it. Yeah,
that is fantastic.
Yeah.
What's the size roughly?
I think it was 1.5 inches.
Oh, yeah. That's cool, man.
Let me find it here.
So you could basically build a hex crawl with your players.
Fiskars, they make a lot of cutting things. You see them at Walmart, or not Walmart, like at Michael's and stuff. But they have a large hexagon and an extra large hexagon cutter. Yeah.
Wow. That's rad, man.
Yeah. I think it's 1.5 inches one, and then, but yeah, 2 inch. That they got one of each of those.
Cool.
Yeah.
I like that idea. That is so cool. That makes me want to go and cut up some magic cards now. I got a big pile of bulk that I was thinking of giving to a friend, but maybe I'll just cut them into hexes now. Yeah.
The one trick about it is, I'll say, if you're going to use one of those, usually they're like the hex ones that I'm looking at. It's a kind of like, it looks like one of those old strength gripper things, like 2 handles, but some of the circular punches are kind of like pushed down from the top. like a stapler.
Right.
The trick to those is because you can't hardly see what you're cutting. The trick to those is turn them upside down and then put the magic card like face up, facing you, so upside down to the cutter, but right side up to you because the cutter's upside down. If that makes sense,
Yep.
and slide it in, and then you can see what you're going to get after you punch it open. Because
Mm,
otherwise you're trying to go in the blind, and you end up cutting off a. It's actually kind of hard to center some of those magic cards, right? Because they're like to get them inside that. And 1 inch circles, I don't think it'd work. They're too small. 1.5 though works. But
cool, man.
mhm.
Well, this has been a very interesting conversation. I'm been really glad that we can talk about magic on the podcast finally,
Heck yeah.
and we managed to tie it back into D&D somehow.
We hit all our flags, right?
Yeah.
We did the rally. No, I love it. We'll have to get together some other time and talk Necromunda and Mordheim and all that. But
Oh
yeah,
yeah, that for
yeah.
sure, definitely. I so just to kind of close out, what do you have any kind of like plans for the future of like kind of projects that you're working on or
By nature, I'm a person that like I'm happiest when I'm making stuff, and so I'm constantly like writing or drawing or whatever. And I was telling somebody this the other day. Like I have a tendency to take all my hobbies and destroy them by turning them into like by leveling them up too much.
mm,
And so, like, I don't know, a while back, I got into fountain pens, and then I started buying broken vintage fountain pens off eBay and fixing them and reselling them. And then I started building, making 3D designs for my printer to like for ink stands and like pen holders and stuff. And and then I started thinking about selling them, and then and then I implode. I'm like, I get to that point and I go, what am I doing? Like, this isn't fun anymore. Why, like for me, the fun is in the creating and then the problem solving, right?
right?
So that's why when I finish something or finished as I'm going to finish it design wise, if I feel like I want to put it out there, I put it out there for free on itch.io, and people
Okay.
can give me a few bucks if they want or they don't. I'm perfectly fine either way. And because for me, it was about making something kind of cool, right? And
Yeah.
it's hard to say what my plans are. But every time I think about doing something a little bit more structured, like restarting the podcast or going back and publishing taking my old Plunderground zines and rewriting them for Shadow Dark and putting them in a book and selling the book, I'm like I go into the closet and hit myself with a whip or whatever until I get over it. 'Cause I'm like, stop trying to make your life more complicated, right?
I can totally feel where you're coming from. I had a lot of reservations about doing a podcast for
Mhm.
exactly that reason. And I can
I mean, there's great
attest.
upsides to it too. So don't give me,
Yeah.
like go, but
Yeah. No,
yeah,
I, I, I really enjoy doing this. And I think the thing that I've discovered I enjoy the most is being able to talk to people like you. And it feels, it feels like talking to friends about, something that we love and we care about. And that's where I get a lot of the joy from.
yeah.
It's all the other stuff that comes along where I'm like, yeah, maybe not so much.
Well, to play the other side of it, I mean, that's also what I like when I like listening, right? So like I like listening to people who are talking about something they love.
Mm.
And so like I really enjoyed your latest on where you're talking to the guy from Mongoose Publishing, right?
Oh,
About
thank you.
I mean, it was just cool to hear some of the stories, like how Mark ended up selling the property to them, but also just what they're thinking about, what they got planned, and what they're into. You could tell it's somebody who likes what they do,
Hmm.
likes it. And it's true of anything. You get people that are geeking out about something they love, and you get exciting ideas, and then you go spend a bunch of money that you shouldn't spend,
Yeah.
and this, yeah. So apologies to anybody who goes out now and sinks their life savings into magic, and or to anybody who tries to make a peanut butter omelet and tell me how to make it work. Crack that nut. Yeah.
I would like, this is one of the problems is that people haven't been taking full advantage of Dungeon Plunger at gmail.com. Send me your emails about crazy things that you've attempted like this. I am not as brave as Ray is, but I know that there's people out there who love their experimentations. So send me an email with the crazy stuff. Send me the emails with if you have tried Ray's recipe, and send it to Ray as well, because I'm sure he wants to hear it. But this has been a lot of fun, dude.
Yeah, same. I've enjoyed it. Thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. The show would have been lesser for not having a Ray Otis episode at some point or another.
Right on, right on. Well, keep on plunging.
All right. Thank you so much. And to the rest of you, plungers up, and we will talk next time. Take care. That's all for this week, folks. Music and Stingers by Reed Reimer of Fable Factory Studio. Cover art by John McNally. And a special thanks to Edward Vallee, the voice of Hecktor.
Greetings, listener! It is I, Hecktor, the real Dungeon Plunger. Not that Linguinion's Jason. If you want to hear more interviews like this one, follow us and share this podcast with your friends, your family, your neighbors, random strangers, the people living in the wall, the troll that lives under the bridge, the guardian of the lost city, everyone! It means the world to us that you share our podcast and make our numbers bigger. Plungers up!
And remember, when you're plunging in the dungeon and nature calls, watch out for mimics disguised as toilets. They're a pain in the butt.